The restaurant was bright and busy, filled with the hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the soft melody of a piano playing in the corner. Waiters and waitresses moved quickly between tables, carrying plates of food and glasses of wine, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. Among them was a young waitress who had worked there for a few months. She was small and unassuming, with a gentle smile that tried to hide the fatigue that came from long hours on her feet. She had always been careful, always polite, always trying not to draw too much attention to herself, but tonight felt different. It started like any other evening, with customers chatting and laughing, the staff rushing back and forth. She moved from table to table, refilling drinks and taking orders, trying to keep up with the pace. She noticed a group of people at one of the tables in the corner. They were dressed sharply, with confident attitudes that made them stand out. From the way they were whispering and glancing in her direction, she felt a little uneasy. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her work. As she approached their table with a tray of drinks, one of them made a comment just loud enough for her to hear. It was playful, but mocking, about how small and fragile she looked. She froze for a moment, unsure whether to respond. Her cheeks flushed, and she forced herself to smile politely. "Here are your drinks," she said softly, setting the tray down carefully. They laughed quietly, a sound that felt sharp and uncomfortable. One of them leaned back in their chair and called her over again, pretending to need something. She went to them, trying to remain calm. Their comments were cruel in a casual way, teasing her about dropping a spoon earlier or the way she walked. Each remark chipped away at her confidence, and she felt the weight of every eye in the room on her. She wanted to disappear, to hide somewhere safe, but she had a job to do. Despite the discomfort, she tried to continue serving them with her usual polite smile. She moved to other tables, hoping the mocking would stop, but the group in the corner continued to whisper and laugh. She overheard bits of their conversation, phrases meant to belittle her, and her heart sank each time. She had experienced teasing before, but this felt sharper, more deliberate. The laughter echoed in her mind, making her feel small and out of place. Yet beneath the embarrassment, a quiet determination began to grow. She reminded herself of who she was and what she could do. While she may have been small and overlooked, she had skills, talents that went unnoticed by most people. She had spent years playing the piano in her room, in practice rooms at school, and in small gatherings, always perfecting her touch, her expression, and her ability to convey emotion through music. The idea that someone could mock her without knowing her full story ignited a spark inside her. She decided not to let their words define her. The evening continued, the restaurant bustling with energy. She kept moving, keeping her mind on the tasks at hand, pouring drinks, clearing plates, and taking orders. Each time she passed the table in the corner, she caught snippets of their laughter and mockery. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but she refused to let it break her. She reminded herself that this was temporary, that the night would eventually pass, and that her worth was not determined by the opinions of strangers. As she carried a tray of desserts, she noticed the piano player in the corner had stepped away, leaving the instrument unattended. The sight of the piano made her heart skip a beat. She had always loved the piano, and she knew that moment could be an opportunity to express herself in a way words never could. Her fingers itched to play, to bring music to life, to transform the atmosphere around her. Still, doubt crept in. What if she made a mistake? What if they laughed at her again? But the memory of the mocking comments, the whispering laughter, and the underestimation fueled her courage. She could either continue to feel small and powerless, or she could take a chance and show the world what she was capable of. The choice was hers. She walked past the group again, pretending to serve another table, and glanced at the piano. It was an elegant instrument, polished and shining under the soft lights of the restaurant. She took a deep breath, feeling the nervous flutter in her stomach, but also a sense of readiness. She had practiced countless hours, had faced nerves before, and now she was ready to step out of the shadows. As she approached the piano, she felt the eyes of some patrons on her, though most were focused on their meals and conversations. The group that had mocked her noticed her movement, their expressions changing from amusement to curiosity. She hesitated for a moment, letting her hands hover over the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingertips. She could feel the tension in the room, the anticipation that even she did not fully recognize yet. She began with a single note, soft and tentative, testing the waters. The sound filled the space, delicate and clear, and she took another breath, letting her fingers move with more confidence. She began to play a simple melody, one that she knew well, letting the music flow naturally. Her focus was complete, her body relaxed, and her mind free from the earlier embarrassment. The music became an extension of her emotions, a language that required no words. Slowly, patrons began to notice, some turning in their seats to listen. The mocking group stopped their whispered comments, their curiosity piqued. The initial laughter had faded, replaced by a quiet attention. She felt a sense of calm wash over her, the nervousness replaced by the joy of playing. Each note was a declaration, a statement that she was more than their ridicule, more than their judgment. As the melody continued, she allowed herself to play with feeling, adding subtle flourishes and gentle dynamics. The restaurant seemed to shift around her. The hum of conversation softened, and the clinking of glasses became a distant echo. The focus was on the music, on the story she was telling through her fingers. She could see faces in the crowd, expressions changing from surprise to admiration. Even the group that had mocked her now watched, unsure of how to respond. With each passing moment, her confidence grew. She played a piece that she loved, one that reflected both her emotions and her skill. She felt the energy of the room, the collective attention of the patrons, and she embraced it. For the first time that evening, she felt truly seen, not for her appearance or mistakes, but for her talent, her dedication, and her courage. The melody lingered in the air, soft but powerful, filling the space with warmth and beauty. Patrons began to murmur quietly, impressed by the skill and emotion of the performance. Some exchanged glances, nodding in appreciation, while others sat in silent awe. The group that had mocked her seemed unsure, caught between their previous amusement and the undeniable display of talent before them. By the time she finished the piece, there was a moment of stunned silence. It was as if the room had collectively held its breath, absorbing the beauty of what had just happened. She looked around, her chest heaving slightly from the effort and emotion, and felt a rush of pride. The laughter and mockery from earlier seemed distant, almost unreal, replaced by a new reality where she had proven herself through her skill and courage. Patrons began to applaud, some softly at first, then more confidently, filling the room with genuine appreciation. Even the group that had mocked her now clapped, albeit reluctantly, acknowledging the talent they had underestimated. The waitress smiled, a mixture of relief, pride, and happiness washing over her. She had faced humiliation and turned it into an opportunity to shine, and the feeling was intoxicating. As she stepped away from the piano, she felt a new sense of self-worth. The evening was far from over, but she knew that something significant had happened. She had faced ridicule, embraced her talent, and transformed the perception of those around her. The experience would stay with her, a reminder that courage, skill, and authenticity could overcome judgment and mockery. She returned to her duties, carrying herself with a newfound confidence. Patrons watched her with renewed respect, colleagues offered subtle nods of approval, and even the mocking group seemed less certain of their earlier assumptions. The restaurant continued its lively rhythm, but she moved through it with a sense of purpose and pride that had been absent before. She knew that her life had changed in a small but meaningful way that night, and the memory of the piano and the music she had shared would remain a source of strength for her in the future. The evening had settled into a comfortable rhythm, with the restaurant filled with the soft chatter of diners and the occasional clatter of plates. The waitress moved between tables, her movements smoother than before, her confidence from the brief piano moment giving her a subtle glow. She noticed the group in the corner again, still whispering among themselves, but their laughter was quieter now, curious rather than mocking. They had seen a hint of something unexpected, and she felt a tiny spark of defiance as she carried drinks past them. The piano in the corner stood silently, polished and inviting under the gentle glow of the lights. The original player had stepped away for a short break, leaving the instrument unattended. For a moment, she hesitated, glancing at it from across the room. Her heart beat faster at the thought. She had spent years mastering her craft, practicing in empty rooms where no one could judge her. This was different, though. This was in public, in front of strangers who had already made their opinions about her. The idea of sitting at the piano in front of the entire restaurant filled her with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of her purpose. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone, but she wanted to share the part of herself that had always stayed hidden. The music inside her had weight and beauty, and tonight she could let it flow freely. She reminded herself that mistakes did not define her, and the fear of judgment could not hold her back. Every step toward the piano felt like a small victory against the anxiety that had shadowed her all night. As she approached, some patrons began to notice. Heads turned, eyes following her slow, deliberate steps toward the instrument. Even the group that had mocked her earlier now watched, curiosity etched on their faces. There was a moment of silence that seemed to stretch, the kind of silence that held the weight of anticipation. She felt it pressing gently against her, but it was not unpleasant. It was the tension of possibility, the space where something extraordinary could happen. She reached the piano and placed her hands on the keys, feeling the familiar texture under her fingertips. It was smooth and cold at first, a reminder of the many hours she had spent practicing alone. She closed her eyes for a second, letting her fingers remember the movements, letting her mind drift into the music. She began with a gentle note, soft and almost hesitant, like dipping a toe into cold water. The sound carried through the room, subtle yet noticeable, drawing the attention of nearby diners. With each note, her confidence grew. She began to play a melody she knew well, a simple but beautiful piece that had been her companion in countless quiet nights. The music started to flow naturally, her fingers moving with a grace that made the notes come alive. She played not for approval, not to silence the mocking, but because the music had always been a part of her soul. In that moment, she and the piano were connected, and nothing else mattered. The patrons in the restaurant began to notice, their conversations fading as they listened. Some paused mid-bite, others stopped stirring their drinks, all drawn in by the unexpected beauty. The group that had mocked her was frozen, their expressions changing from disbelief to fascination. The first few notes had shattered the preconceptions they had clung to, replacing ridicule with awe. They leaned forward slightly, captivated by the skill and emotion emanating from her small frame. As the melody continued, she felt a rush of joy. Each note was a conversation with the room, a way to share her feelings without words. She could feel the energy shifting, the atmosphere transforming from ordinary dining to something magical. The restaurant, usually a place of routine and small talk, had become a space where emotion and artistry intertwined. Her nerves began to melt away, replaced by a focused calm, a quiet determination to let the music speak for her. She allowed herself to play more freely now, adding subtle flourishes and soft dynamics, letting the melody rise and fall like a gentle wave. Her fingers danced across the keys, precise yet expressive, creating patterns that seemed to tell a story. Only the heart could understand. Patrons moved closer, drawn by the sound, their curiosity blossoming into admiration. The group in the corner no longer whispered. They sat in stunned silence, watching her every movement, the mockery replaced by respect they had not anticipated. With every note, she felt more alive. The act of playing was no longer just a display of skill. It was a declaration of her worth, a quiet rebellion against the assumptions of strangers. The earlier embarrassment and teasing faded, replaced by pride and fulfillment. She had found her voice in the music, and it resonated far beyond the walls of her mind. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a bridge connecting her inner world with the reality of the room, transforming perception with each chord. The melody flowed seamlessly, the transitions between soft and loud notes creating a sense of movement that captivated the listeners. Some diners closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched in awe, unable to tear their gaze from her hands. The room was alive with the emotion she poured into each phrase, a silent communication that transcended the earlier mockery. Even the staff paused briefly, noticing the shift in energy, the way the entire restaurant seemed to bend toward the piano. The group that had once laughed at her now exchanged looks, their previous confidence replaced with surprise and tentative admiration. They realized that their judgments had been shallow, based solely on appearances, and that they had overlooked something extraordinary. The realization came quietly, without words, as they witnessed the skill, passion, and courage that radiated from her performance. They could no longer see her as just a waitress. She was an artist, commanding attention with grace and talent. As she continued, she began to feel a connection with the patrons, an unspoken dialogue through the music. The piano became a vessel for emotion, carrying joy, vulnerability, and strength across the room. She felt the collective response, the gentle nods, the soft smiles, the glimmers of surprise, and it encouraged her further. Each note reinforced her confidence, each chord strengthened her presence, and each pause created space for the room to absorb the story she was telling. Time seemed to stretch, the performance unfolding as if in slow motion. She lost track of the minutes, immersed in the act of creation. Her body moved with the rhythm, her fingers translating thought and feeling into sound. She was no longer the timid waitress who had been mocked moments before. She was a musician, fully present, fully alive, fully herself. The energy in the room fed her, and she fed it back through the music, creating a cycle of shared emotion that left everyone captivated. The diners, who had been engaged in casual conversation before, now found themselves focused entirely on her. Some whispered quietly to each other, marveling at the unexpected talent they had just witnessed. Others simply sat in silence, letting the music resonate within them, feeling the emotional impact without needing to speak. The atmosphere had shifted from ordinary to extraordinary, and she was at the center, guiding everyone through the experience. The melody began to build, gaining complexity and depth, her confidence flowing naturally into the piece. She experimented with tempo and dynamics, letting the music rise to gentle crescendos and fall into soft passages that invited introspection. The piano was an extension of her emotions, allowing her to express herself in ways that words could never capture. Every keystroke was deliberate, thoughtful, and infused with her personal expression. The group that had mocked her now sat in awe, unable to deny the beauty and skill before them. Their earlier amusement had vanished, replaced by a sense of humility. They realized they had underestimated someone based on superficial judgments, and the lesson was clear. Talent, dedication, and courage could not be measured by appearances, and they had witnessed a living example of that truth. As the final notes approached, she felt a mix of satisfaction and melancholy. The performance was nearing its end, and the spell that had captivated the room would soon be broken. She played the concluding chords with care, letting them resonate fully before gently lifting her hands from the keys. There was a moment of silence, a collective breath held, as the last echoes faded into the room. The effect was profound, leaving an impression that lingered long after the music stopped. Applause began softly, then grew louder as patrons expressed their appreciation. Some clapped enthusiastically, others cheered quietly, all acknowledging the extraordinary display of talent they had just experienced. The group that had mocked her offered tentative applause, their expressions a mixture of respect and surprise. The waitress felt a wave of relief and pride, knowing that she had faced fear and doubt, embraced her talent, and transformed perception with a simple act of courage. Returning to her duties, she carried herself with newfound confidence. The restaurant continued its lively rhythm, but the energy had shifted. Patrons approached her with smiles, colleagues nodded approvingly, and even the once mocking group seemed less certain of their previous assumptions. She moved through the room with purpose, aware that she had not only shared her music, but also left a lasting impression. The evening had started with ridicule, but through skill, courage, and authenticity, she had created a moment of wonder that would be remembered by all who witnessed it. The moment she began to play, A hush settled over the restaurant. The soft chatter faded, the clinking of glasses became distant, and all eyes turned toward her and the piano. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed effortless, drawing a melody that was both gentle and powerful. Each note carried emotion, a story that unfolded without words. Patrons leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the unexpected beauty coming from someone they had only just noticed. At first, her playing was cautious, careful, almost as if testing the waters. But as she continued, her confidence grew. The music flowed naturally, her fingers finding their own path across the keys, weaving a tapestry of sound that filled the room. She was no longer aware of the mocking group in the corner or the curious stares of the other patrons. In that moment, she was only herself and the piano, connected in a way that transcended fear and doubt. The group that had laughed at her earlier now sat in stunned silence. Their whispers and jokes were gone, replaced by wide-eyed attention. They had underestimated her, and the realization was hitting them slowly. Every chord she struck seemed to challenge the assumptions they had made, revealing a skill and depth they had not anticipated. Their expressions shifted from amusement to awe, and some exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that they had been wrong. The melody swelled, rising and falling like gentle waves, carrying a mix of emotions that resonated with everyone present. Some diners closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched her hands move with fascination. The sound was rich and full, yet delicate, showing both technical mastery and emotional depth. It was impossible to look away, impossible not to be affected by the performance. As she played, memories of her years of practice and dedication came flooding back. Nights spent in quiet rooms, hours perfecting scales, experimenting with melodies, learning to express feelings through the piano. All of it led to this moment. She realized that all those hours, all the sweat and frustration, had prepared her to turn a humiliating evening into something unforgettable. The thought gave her a surge of strength, and she let the music grow bolder, more expressive. Her body moved with the rhythm, subtle sways that matched the emotion of each passage. Her hands seemed to glide effortlessly over the keys, striking notes with precision and feeling. The room felt alive with her music, as if the piano itself was breathing, communicating with the audience in a language they all understood. The power of her performance was not just in the technical skill but in the emotion she poured into every note. The group that had mocked her now seemed mesmerized. Their previous confidence had been replaced with a mix of respect, surprise, and perhaps a little guilt. They had laughed without knowing, judged without understanding, and now they were witnessing the truth of her talent. Some of them shifted in their seats, unsure how to react, while others sat completely still, absorbing the music with quiet admiration. It was a lesson they hadn't expected to learn that night. She played with growing freedom, her fingers exploring new combinations, her touch becoming more expressive. The melody told a story, one of struggle and triumph, of doubt and self-discovery. Each note was deliberate, carrying a piece of her experience and emotion. The restaurant, which had been a place of ordinary routines, had transformed into a space of magic, filled with the sounds of her heart and skill. Patrons began to murmur quietly among themselves, sharing their astonishment without breaking the spell. Some whispered about how they had never expected to see such talent from someone so unassuming. Others simply smiled, letting the music touch them in ways words could not. The atmosphere had shifted completely, and she could feel it. The energy of the room fed her performance, and in turn, her music seemed to envelop everyone, drawing them into the story she was telling. She added gentle flourishes and subtle dynamics, creating contrasts that made the piece even more compelling. The soft passages were intimate, almost like a secret shared with the audience, while the louder moments were bold and commanding, showcasing her technical skill and emotional depth. It was a delicate balance, one she executed flawlessly, capturing the attention and admiration of everyone in the room. Even the staff paused for a moment, watching in awe as she played. They had seen her work hard, seen her handle the busy restaurant with care and patience, but this was something entirely different. They saw a different side of her now, a side that was confident, expressive, and undeniably talented. The performance was not just for the diners. It was a revelation for everyone present, a display of what dedication and courage could achieve. The music took on a life of its own, flowing through the room, touching hearts, and transforming perceptions. The mocking group now sat quietly, their previous amusement gone, replaced by a newfound respect. They had underestimated her, and the realization was undeniable. She had taken what could have been a moment of embarrassment and turned it into a showcase of extraordinary talent. Their laughter was gone, replaced by an appreciation they had not anticipated. She continued to play, letting the music rise and fall with the natural flow of emotion. Her connection to the piano was total, her focus complete. The room seemed to hold its breath, every patron absorbed in the sound and story. It was as if time had slowed, allowing everyone to fully experience the beauty and skill before them. She was no longer just a waitress. She had become an artist commanding the attention of the entire room. The melody reached a peak, a moment of intensity that showcased both her technical skill and her emotional expression. Fingers flew across the keys, moving with precision and fluidity, creating a sound that was rich and powerful yet still filled with subtle emotion. Patrons leaned in, captivated, some with wide eyes, others with tears glistening, all experiencing the music in their own way. The transformation in perception was complete. She was no longer underestimated, no longer overlooked. As she began to bring the piece to a close, the atmosphere was thick with admiration and wonder. Every note lingered, every chord resonated, leaving an impression that would stay with the listeners long after the music stopped. The mocking group, now fully silent, watched with a mixture of respect and amazement. They had learned an unexpected lesson, one that words could not fully capture. As they realized the depth and talent of someone they had judged too quickly, the final chords rang out, clear and powerful, and then faded into silence. There was a brief pause, a collective inhalation as everyone absorbed the last notes. And then the applause began, soft at first, growing louder as patrons expressed their appreciation. Hands clapped, heads nodded, and smiles spread across the room. Even the group that had mocked her earlier joined in, albeit reluctantly at first, recognizing the extraordinary performance they had witnessed. She lifted her hands from the keys, her chest heaving slightly from the exertion and emotion of the performance. A sense of pride and fulfillment washed over her. She had faced ridicule, embraced her talent, and astonished everyone. The moment was transformative, not just for her but for everyone in the room who had underestimated her. The music had told a story that no words could, a story of courage, skill, and inner strength. Returning to her duties, she carried herself differently now, with a quiet confidence and a sense of achievement. Patrons looked at her with renewed respect, colleagues nodded approvingly, and even the group that had mocked her seemed humbled. The restaurant continued its lively rhythm, but the energy had shifted, infused with the memory of the music and the realization that extraordinary talent can come from the most unexpected places. She moved among the tables with ease, the nervousness of earlier replaced by calm assurance. The memory of the performance lingered in her mind, a reminder of what she was capable of when she trusted herself and her abilities. The night, which had begun with mockery and doubt, had transformed into a celebration of talent, courage, and the power of self-expression. The piano had not only allowed her to share her skill, but had also changed the way everyone saw her, leaving a lasting impression that would not soon be forgotten. The music had settled into a rhythm that seemed to float effortlessly through the restaurant, touching everyone in the room. The waitress's fingers moved over the keys with a confidence that grew with each passing note, her body swaying slightly as if carried by the music itself. The melody was no longer just a series of notes. It had become a living story, filled with emotion, tension, and release. Patrons leaned in, unable to resist the pull of her playing, feeling every chord as if it were speaking directly to them. The group that had mocked her earlier now sat in complete silence, their earlier amusement entirely replaced by awe. They had been caught off guard by the depth and beauty of her music, unable to deny the skill that radiated from her hands. Their eyes followed every movement, their posture rigid with concentration. For the first time that evening, they were not in control of the room. They were observers, witnesses to a talent that demanded respect. The shift was palpable, a quiet transformation that spread through the restaurant. She let the melody build, rising and falling like waves, alternating between moments of gentle intimacy and powerful crescendos. Each passage seemed to convey a different emotion: hope, longing, triumph, and reflection. Patrons felt the weight of each note, the subtle expressions in her playing revealing a depth they could not have imagined. The music was more than entertainment. It was a bridge between her inner world and the audience, a connection that words could never achieve. The waitress closed her eyes briefly, letting herself become fully immersed in the performance. She no longer thought about the mocking group, the curious glances of other patrons, or the long hours she had spent serving tables. In that moment, she was a conduit for the music, allowing it to flow through her effortlessly. Her fingers danced across the keys, precise and expressive, creating a tapestry of sound that held everyone captive. As the piece reached its midpoint, she introduced subtle variations, intricate embellishments that showcased both technical mastery and emotional depth. The music grew more complex, layers of harmony weaving together in a way that felt organic and alive. Patrons shifted in their seats, some whispering to one another in amazement, others simply sitting in awe, unable to look away. Even the staff paused, taking a moment to appreciate the unexpected brilliance unfolding before them. The group that had once mocked her now exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of humility and admiration. They realized they had misjudged her, allowing superficial impressions to cloud their perception. The quiet respect that replaced their laughter was not forced. It was genuine, born from witnessing someone rise above expectation and deliver something extraordinary. They leaned forward slightly, captivated by the skill, emotion, and confidence she exuded. The melody swelled, the music carrying a sense of triumph and revelation. Patrons felt the energy shift around them, the room alive with the resonance of the piano. Each note seemed to invite reflection, stirring emotions and memories, and drawing the audience into a shared experience. The music was no longer just her expression. It had become a dialogue, a conversation between the pianist and everyone in the room, bridging gaps and transforming perceptions. Her playing became bolder, more expressive, as she allowed herself to fully embrace the moment. The music soared, filling every corner of the restaurant, leaving no space untouched. Patrons found themselves caught in its current, some tapping their fingers in time, others holding their breath in anticipation. The group that had mocked her earlier now watched silently, the lesson of the evening sinking in. They had underestimated someone based on appearance, and the reality was humbling. The waitress added subtle shifts in tempo, playing with dynamics that drew attention to the emotion behind each phrase. The soft passages felt intimate, almost confessional, while the louder, more dramatic moments conveyed strength and mastery. The contrast captivated everyone, creating a sense of ebb and flow that made the music feel alive. It was impossible not to be moved, impossible not to recognize the courage and talent that lay behind every note. As she continued, the atmosphere in the restaurant transformed completely. Conversations ceased, diners forgot their meals, and even the sound of cutlery became a background hum. The focus was entirely on the piano and the performer, a small, unassuming waitress who had become the center of attention not through charm or force but through skill, emotion, and the courage to take a risk. The room was united in a moment of shared awe, experiencing something rare and powerful. The group that had mocked her earlier now seemed humbled, their laughter replaced with quiet contemplation. They had been wrong, and the recognition of that truth was inescapable. Each note she played reinforced the lesson. Talent and dedication could not be measured by superficial judgments. The music spoke where words could not, delivering a message of respect, humility, and admiration that resonated far beyond the performance itself. The melody continued to evolve, introducing new motifs and flourishes that demonstrated her creativity and command of the instrument. Patrons were drawn deeper into the experience, feeling as though the music was speaking directly to their hearts. The energy in the room was electric, yet gentle, a mixture of reverence and excitement that amplified with each passing measure. Her playing was not just a performance. It was a revelation, an unfolding story of resilience, skill, and emotional depth. She allowed herself a brief smile, recognizing the impact of her music. The nervousness and self-doubt that had shadowed her earlier in the evening were gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and fulfillment. She was no longer merely a waitress. She was a storyteller, an artist capable of moving people in ways that transcended daily routines and social expectations. The room responded to her authenticity, and she fed off that energy, letting it inspire her playing even further. The music reached a climactic passage, a series of rapid, precise notes that demonstrated her technical skill while maintaining the emotional resonance of the piece. Patrons watched in awe, some leaning forward in their seats, others closing their eyes, completely absorbed. The group that had mocked her earlier now sat quietly, unable to look away, their expressions a mix of respect, astonishment, and a touch of shame. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that could not be dismissed or ignored. As the climax gave way to a softer, more reflective passage, the room seemed to exhale, taking in the gentle notes and allowing them to settle into the hearts of the listeners. The contrast between power and delicacy, between triumph and introspection, made the performance all the more captivating. Patrons felt the full spectrum of emotion, the highs and lows, the energy and the calm, all conveyed through her skillful hands and expressive touch. The final section approached, and she began to slow the tempo, letting each note resonate fully before moving to the next. The melody became simpler, yet no less powerful, leaving space for reflection and emotion. Patrons felt the weight of the moment, the culmination of the music and the story it had told. The group that had once mocked her now watched with quiet admiration, having learned a lesson about underestimating others and the depth that could exist beyond appearances. The last notes rang out, clear and pure, lingering in the air like a whisper. A brief silence followed, as if the room itself was holding its breath, savoring the conclusion of a remarkable performance. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, first softly, then growing louder, filling the restaurant with recognition and appreciation. Patrons clapped enthusiastically, some cheering quietly, others nodding in approval. Even the group that had mocked her earlier joined in, their applause hesitant at first, then more genuine as they acknowledged the extraordinary display of talent. The waitress lifted her hands from the keys, feeling a rush of pride and relief. She had faced ridicule, embraced her abilities, and transformed the perception of everyone in the room. The moment was a turning point, not only for the patrons but for herself, affirming her worth and her potential. She had shown that courage, skill, and authenticity could overcome judgment and create something unforgettable. Returning to her duties, she moved with a quiet confidence, aware that the evening had changed her in ways that would last far beyond the restaurant. Patrons looked at her with newfound respect, colleagues offered approving nods, and even the group that had mocked her seemed subdued, their earlier arrogance replaced with humility. The energy of the room remained charged, a lasting impression of the power of music, courage, and human talent. She continued serving tables, her movements steady and assured, carrying the memory of the performance with her. The music had not only allowed her to express herself but had also transformed the atmosphere, creating a moment of shared beauty and appreciation. It was a reminder that even in moments of doubt and ridicule, talent and courage could shine, leaving an impact that would be remembered long after the last note had faded. The applause continued to echo in the restaurant even as the last note faded, filling the space with warmth and admiration. The waitress stood up from the piano, her chest still rising and falling from the exertion and emotion of the performance. She could feel the eyes of every patron on her, not with judgment or mockery, but with genuine respect and amazement. The group that had mocked her earlier now looked sheepish, unsure how to respond, but there was no denying the skill they had just witnessed. As she returned to her duties, the feeling of pride stayed with her. Patrons smiled and thanked her as she passed their tables, some pausing to compliment her on the music. Even colleagues who had only known her as a hardworking, quiet waitress now saw a new side of her, one filled with talent, courage, and determination. Every nod, every smile, reinforced the realization that she had created something extraordinary, that her music had left an impact that went beyond the notes themselves. The group that had mocked her earlier remained at their table, their expressions subdued. They had expected an easy target, someone to laugh at, and instead they had witnessed brilliance. One of them finally spoke quietly, expressing admiration for the skill they had underestimated. Another nodded, looking thoughtful, as if the evening had taught them a lesson about assumptions, judgment, and the power of hidden talent. The waitress noticed their change but did not dwell on it. She was focused on the feeling of accomplishment that now filled her. The restaurant continued its rhythm, but the energy had shifted. Conversations resumed, but they were softer, more thoughtful. Patrons occasionally glanced toward the piano, still feeling the resonance of the performance lingering in the air. Even those who had not been paying full attention before now carried a sense of awe and appreciation for the artistry they had witnessed. The music had created a connection between everyone in the room, a shared experience that would be remembered long after the night ended. The waitress took a moment to step away from the crowd, leaning slightly against a wall to catch her breath. She allowed herself a quiet smile, reflecting on how far she had come that evening. The nerves and embarrassment from earlier seemed distant, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and pride. She had faced ridicule, embraced her talent, and turned a moment that could have been humiliating into something unforgettable. The feeling was empowering, a confirmation that her skills and courage had value, not just in her own eyes, but in the eyes of everyone who had witnessed her performance. Colleagues approached her quietly, offering congratulations and words of admiration. They spoke of how inspiring it was to see someone rise above doubt and judgment, to show courage and talent in such a vulnerable moment. Their words warmed her, reinforcing the impact of what she had accomplished. It was not just about playing the piano. It was about standing up for herself, expressing who she truly was, and allowing that expression to resonate with others. The group that had mocked her earlier now attempted to make amends, offering hesitant compliments and acknowledgments of her skill. The waitress received them with grace, choosing to focus on the positive rather than holding onto the memory of their earlier cruelty. She understood that their reaction was part of the lesson they were learning, and it was enough to know that the music had spoken louder than any words ever could. Her focus remained on the sense of pride and achievement that filled her, the knowledge that she had transformed perception through her talent. The piano, now silent, seemed to carry a lingering presence, a reminder of the power it had helped her express. She thought about how music had always been a part of her life, a companion through quiet nights and moments of self-doubt. That evening, it had become more than a personal refuge. It had become a bridge to the world, connecting her to people she might never have otherwise reached. The realization filled her with a quiet joy, a sense of purpose that went beyond the restaurant and the patrons who had been present. As the night continued, she moved between tables with a new sense of ease and confidence. Patrons continued to compliment her, some asking questions about the piece she had played, others simply expressing appreciation for the unexpected beauty they had experienced. Each interaction reinforced the impact of her performance, reminding her that courage, skill, and authenticity could leave lasting impressions. She carried the memory of the music with her, allowing it to inform the way she moved, spoke, and interacted with those around her. The group that had mocked her eventually left the restaurant, their departure quieter than their arrival. They had been changed by what they had seen, their previous arrogance replaced by reflection and humility. The waitress watched them leave without judgment, understanding that their change was part of the story. What mattered most was the affirmation she had received, the validation of her talent and the recognition of her worth. In the quiet moments between the rushes of service, she found herself returning to the piano, touching the keys lightly, remembering the flow of the performance. Each note reminded her of the courage it had taken to play in public, of the way she had transformed nervous energy into artistry, and of the connections she had forged with the audience. The music had become a part of her story, a symbol of resilience, skill, and self-expression that would continue to shape her path. The restaurant began to empty as the night drew to a close. Patrons left with smiles, some speaking quietly to companions about the performance they had witnessed. The sense of awe and admiration lingered, a testament to the impact of the evening. Colleagues began to clean and close the restaurant, exchanging comments about the extraordinary moment they had just witnessed. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of accomplishment and inspiration, the memory of the performance leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The waitress took a moment to reflect quietly, standing by the piano and breathing in the calm that had replaced the earlier tension. She thought about the journey of the evening, from mockery to triumph, from doubt to confidence, and from invisibility to recognition. It was a journey she had navigated with courage, skill, and authenticity, and it had left her stronger and more self-assured. The experience affirmed her belief in herself and her abilities, showing her the power of embracing talent and opportunity despite fear or judgment. As she prepared to leave for the night, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The evening had begun with challenges and ridicule, but it had ended with recognition, admiration, and personal triumph. She understood that her performance was not just about impressing others. It was about embracing who she was, sharing her passion, and allowing herself to be seen. The music had provided a voice that words could not, and through it, she had connected with others in a profound and lasting way. Walking out of the restaurant, she carried herself differently, with a sense of pride and confidence that would stay with her long after the night ended. She knew that the memory of the evening, the music, and the reactions of the patrons would remain a source of strength and inspiration. She had proven to herself and others that talent, courage, and authenticity could overcome judgment, create connection, and leave a lasting impact. The night had been transformative, and she understood that this was only the beginning of what she could achieve.